Hello, everyone. Welcome to Life of Emerald. We're hosting Sacred Healing Summit with Dr. Tomi and Dr. Molly today. Our topic is balancing burnout and relationship with emotional intelligence as part of sustainable impact to uplift corporate world. We help corporate workers worldwide reduce stress by providing strategies via conscious media on how to take care of the mind, body, and soul health with world-class leaders. Our website is Life of Emerald. Our 7-year vision is to speak about the conscious mind, subconscious mind, and the unconscious mind to uplift humanity day in and day out, one step at a time. Allow me to introduce our guest today. Our first speaker is Dr. Tomi Mitchell. Dr. Tomi is a medical doctor and a certified mental health and wellness coach who helps working professionals overcome mental health challenges and burnout. She has trained with Brandon Burcher's team, handpicked as being a high-performing leader. She has helped thousands of clients over the years and is a highly sought-out speaker for mental health and wellness topic. Our second speaker, Dr. Molly, is a practicing pediatrician who has cared for thousands of children from birth through college. In addition to owning her practice for over 30 years, she writes for award-winning print media and medical journals. She's a keynote speaker covering topics both medical and parenting related. She is passionate about helping parents raise confident, independent, and empathetic kids in an anxious age. Her style is real, raw advice so parents can be less perfect and more honest. Now, I am Kate. Kate is a healer, storyteller, and a social entrepreneur from Seoul, Korea. I have 15 years of teaching experience, including educating STEM college graduates, sponsored by the South Korean government. I'm the alumnus of the Stanford Graduate School of Business LEAD program, and our ancestors are kings of South Korea of the Joseon dynasty and the scholars of the noble class and kings in the Silla dynasty. Now, let us welcome our panelists, speakers, and guests. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Kate.
Hi.
Honored to host you and have this dialogue with all of you here. Anna, welcome. Marwan, welcome. Our colleagues are here today too. And so what I'm going to do is really have a dialogue with our doctor panelists here about relationship really. So COVID has sort of thrown us under the bus, and depending on do we have a tool, do we not have a tool, that I believe determines the quality of the current situation. And now the first question for all panelists is, could you briefly describe what can cause burnout in relationship, either parent to child relationship, to patient to doctor? Dr. Tomi, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you everyone who's tuning in and those who are listening to the recording, and hi to those Clubhouse folks. So burnout, it's a really popular topic and I'm hoping it's front mind, the center for a lot of us. Burnout, I guess the biggest problem I see is poor boundaries between work and life, right? So oftentimes we can become a blur. And then with that, you have unrealistic expectations or expectations that have not been clearly identified, which can lead to confusion over like taking too much on your work plate. In relationships, it can definitely lead to confusion. And then when you added the pandemic where many of us were shut inside our homes, working from home, then there's that, dynamics between traditional men or women roles, work expectations, being accessible, being a parent to children, et cetera, it truly was a recipe for disaster. So that's my high level overview of burnout. It has to do with boundaries, which is key, and clear expectation. And I guess the third part would be not prioritizing one's physical and mental health.
Absolutely. There's a lot of layers to contributing to burnout. Dr. Molly, what do you think?
I think that the pandemic really created a perfect storm for all of us. And it forced us to face things about ourselves that we may have easily, or maybe not easily, but we had been able to sort of set on the back burner. And then with the circumstances of the pandemic, we were forced to confront things that were probably always there, but now became very visible. So as someone who talks to parents mostly, I'll really focus on that relationship. But what I'm about to say really applies to any relationship. In the parent-child relationship, it's by definition an unbalanced relationship in the way it's made. Parents are required to be always on the giving side of that relationship. The expectation is that you're going to be pouring into your children over and over and over again, with very little coming back to you except what you decide to see through your lens as a parent, right? So you see these charming children, these kids you love so much, and you take whatever those behaviors are, or those the things they might create, and you give those things even more embellishment in your heart in order to sort of feed your soul and fill your cup, because the children themselves aren't always capable of returning back all that you've put into them, right? So it's by nature an unbalanced relationship. And as parents, we've taken on that mantle. We're ready to do it. It's part of what, but it's also what really we talk about as parents as being exhausting too, because it's a lot of give without a lot of give back. Well, during the pandemic, those same sort of dynamics got amplified, because in addition to that constant sort of, what could be felt as an imbalance, there were other stresses laid on top of that. Stresses in your partner relationship, stresses in having to work in a whole new way, stresses in having to manage not only your children's emotional well-being and get dinner on the table, but you had to also, help them with homeschool, schooling from home, all these other things. And so it created a different dynamic in all relationships within your life. So I think that really burnout comes down to, do you feel as though what you're giving is being appropriately balanced out with what you perceive you're receiving in whatever whether it's in a work setting, in a relationship setting, or in a friendship, or in a whatever that sort of transaction is. And it creates, if you feel like there's a great imbalance and you feel like that work you're doing in whatever way isn't rewarded back to you with some sort of balance, it feels like you are just revving that engine without any fuel.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have been on the both end of the spectrum here, and that the COVID-19 has sort of ripped the band-aid off of all of us, it seems like. And by definition, the burnout is a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress or home-place stress that has not been successfully managed. As Dr. Molly, you're talking about the imbalance in parent-to-child relationship, I am thinking about the seesaw. So parent on one side and child on the other side, but they're light by weight. And so, that scale is not too balanced. Dr. Tomi, how do you manage, the patient-doctor relationship? I know you have been in the medical field and you have been on the floor taking care of patients. What is the dynamic like over there?
Definitely was challenging, and 2020 really brought out what was underneath, but I had so cleverly smothered it and muzzled it, and that was not having appropriate work-life balance. You know, we go into medicine, and I'm sure Dr. Molly can appreciate it, with great intentions to make a difference in the lives of our patients and their families, but sometimes it's almost like we want the change more than they do. And we give, and we don't take care of ourselves. So I actually burnt out after a decade plus of practicing more than full time. I can't, the hours I put in a week were shameful when I look at it, and running up 3 businesses at the same time. And it was because I practiced most of what I preached, but the real game changing things like the hands on self care, just regular physical activity, those things that seem so trivial, but we talk to our patients on a regular basis, it makes such a huge impact. And then the other piece about the patient-physician relationship, again, it goes back to the way we're often programmed as physicians, the drives and corporate individuals, not just physicians, but the same drive that got us into medicine, helped us pass our exams, excel in our fields, are the same drives that actually can be a downfall. I actually published an article in Kevin MD, and it was about how this drive is a double-edged sword. It's a blessing, but it's also a curse. And I speak about physicians fondly because I am one, but we have the highest level of suicide rates amongst all professions as physicians, especially those in the caring fields. And you know, the pandemic didn't help it. It really just added more fuel to the fire over something that was already there. So the physician relationship is two-sided, I believe. There's, for the physician or the care provider or the corporate owner, employee, you have to have healthy boundaries. You really have to take your breaks. A lot of people don't unwind and unplug. And because our work is now so virtual, you can be anywhere and check your patient records, you can check your emails. It's very hard, especially when you're driven and dedicated, to want to answer them, so you're not seen as, you know, not motivated, not reliable. Again, that's a double-edged sword. Type A personality. Somebody who doesn't have that kind of drive or hustle may be like, nah, I'm good. They actually tend to relax a little bit more, but not necessarily the most healthiest. But I'm just saying, burnout we often see in, again, people who are very driven, and also people who are stretched to the max. Let's say the mom who has to work 3 jobs to keep the roof over her head and her kids, and to pay for all the expenses, like a single mom or the single parent. That can lead to burnout. It's when your output is greater than your input. You can't pour from an empty cup. And unfortunately, many of us were doing it before. And the pandemic, a lot of our social supports, which was one being the full-time babysitter, aka the teacher, was suddenly gone, and you were it. Not being able to see grandma and grandpa for fear that you might bring them COVID, you know, plus still having to pay your bills, hang on to your jobs during a very stressful economic downturn for many. It was a recipe for disaster. And I say I cracked last year until I really had to smarten up and say, okay, why am I, like, what's my purpose? What's the bigger picture? And that bigger picture is life and my family and living a legacy that I want to live on this earth. So I know I answered many things, but it's really boundaries. You have to be able to say no, thank you. And no, we're mostly women on this Zoom, but I believe women, we tend to be historically more nurturing, more sacrificial. Again, that can be to our detriment, and society knows that. So people have no problem putting it on us, whether it's you as a mother or grandmother. It's like, oh, mom will look after the kids, so I can go do this, right? We all have to have our individual responsibilities and know when it's time to say no, thank you, thanks for the opportunity, but it doesn't work for me right now. And not,
I'm sorry, I'm going to build on that just a little bit, if you don't mind,
please,
because I think also as women or as caregivers, as we are likely, whether you're a man or a woman, as a caregiving personality type, as you take more on and you pile that, you allow yourself to pile it on, I think those types of people are also have a very difficult time even setting boundaries for themselves in their own home. So their kids, for example, they have a difficult time allowing their kids to play independently. They have a difficult time allowing their kids to go to bed easily on their own. All these things. Then that actually snowballs into additional challenges for them, and it creates even more difficulty finding that space for that personal recharge, that time when we can all just sit down and say, you know what, we're all taking a break. You guys can do whatever you want to the kids, but I'm going to read a book right now, or I'm going to, listen to music, whatever my recharge would be. Allowing the kids to do whatever they want, not micromanage that, let them be whatever it's going to be, and let yourself have that time. I think for some very intensely caregiving type parents, that's really, really hard for them. And I think one of the strategies I think that can be useful to help mitigate burnout is to grow a little bit yourself. I know we're going to talk about that, but how do we implement this growth idea, this growth strategy for ourselves so that we can do exactly what you did? What a great personal story of growth you have to be able to go from a place of being overwhelmed and paralyzed, but look at where you are now, in control of a life that is what you envisioned for yourself. And I think for a lot of people experiencing those feelings of overwhelm and stress, it's hard to break free.
Yeah, definitely. I would love to build on that point too, about it's hard to break free. Our next question is, when feeling trapped in patterns with someone you care about, and what's a practical strategy for an elevated and mindful collaboration? And I would like to look that into the practical strategies on how setting a healthy boundary with people. And so the question about feeling trapped is for Dr. Molly. How do we break the patterns? I know you mentioned we have to first recognize, hey, this is not enough. I'm going to do better. And that was the image I got as you are talking, and as Dr. Tomi was mentioning about her story. And how do we effectively break the pattern? Perhaps for some people listening in, it's the pattern has been, could be prolonging for years. How do we do that?
Well, I think you said it yourself initially, Kate, which is, first of all, recognizing that the pattern can be changed. First of all, seeing that a pattern exists in a relationship. So let's say, the easiest one for me to find an example of is a parent-child relationship, because it's the one I give the most advice about. But let's say you're in a pattern with your kids, and that pattern is where you feel by the end of the day, let's say it's a bedtime pattern, and that bedtime pattern is that, the kid needs you or requires that you've got to lay down with the children for whatever this period of time is in order for them to feel comfortable to fall asleep. And this has now gone from being a 15-minute period to being an hour and a half long. And you realize, I can't do this anymore. Or I'm so exhausted by the end, I have no time for myself. I fall asleep in the bed with the child, whatever it is. And you feel like in your mind, you say, this has to change, but you can't see a way out, right? You feel like, I can't, but this is how it's done. This is what we do. I don't know how to do it. And I think there are several things to think about in these situations. First of all, just recognizing that crisis point within yourself, that feeling of overwhelm, is the first step. And saying those words out loud, that I can't do this anymore, or this is so uncomfortable for me. And you don't necessarily have to have the solution, because the solutions are out there in the world. And there are plenty of people who you can connect with to help you find a pathway out if you can't, figure a pathway for yourself. And that's where asking for help is a crucial step for growth. So children are natural growers. They have no qualms about asking for help when they're young. They're doing something, whatever it is. Dad, can you help me? Mom, can you help me? I need help. And you're practically ready to just be, frustrated with all the help they want. But that's the kind of mindset that we need when we find ourselves at a friction point, a point of frustration and a point where we're stalled in our growth. We need to ask for help. And by doing so, we can get past that point of difficulty and move forward. So I know that sounds like, well, that's not like the solution. It isn't that the solution to that specific problem, but it's the solution to all of the problems. And sometimes asking for help. So if you're in a relationship with your partner and you see a dynamic that is exhausting you. I just yesterday had a conversation with my husband because there was a dynamic in our household that was not changing over time. And I felt like I was in the middle between my husband and my son. And I was tired of that dynamic. I was tired of playing, the intermediary here. And I was in tears at one point about it. So I realized the light bulb went on, and you would think, duh, but the light bulb went on. And I said to him, how can we do this differently? I didn't suggest a solution because I wasn't sure I had one. But I said, how can we do this differently? This is how I feel. This is what I see. I need help figuring out how it can be done differently. And through that dialogue between the two of us, we came up with a different way. Now, who knows if it'll work? I don't know yet. It's an experiment. Life's full of these, but we're going to try something different. So that's my advice or my approach that I think could be useful.
Yeah, definitely. What comes to mind is the catch-22 too. We hold ourselves. We need something, but we were told what not to do. And so we're sort of dancing in this bubble, and something has to pop in terms of analogy. So you gave a practical advice. Thanks for that. And Dr. Tomi, you're very adaptive from car to your room. And can you hear us?
Yeah, apparently my phone burnt out. I can hear you. Yeah, my phone got too hot, so it shut down. It burnt out.
So the question to Dr. Molly, you can build on this, is when feeling trapped in patterns with someone you care about, what's a practical strategy for an elevated mindful collaboration? And if you can add the perspective from our audience here, the scenarios that we're talking about, is this based on newly conducted studies and relationship with the pandemic, or is it out of personal experience? And in my belief, it's neither this or that. It's a wisdom
combination. Yeah.
Could you speak on that?
Yeah, definitely. So whenever you're faced with a challenge, I like to use or an opportunity, even more so. The first thing you gotta do is pause, step back, and think, okay, just kind of because we get emotional when we're in a situation, especially when it's someone that you have feelings for, so a romantic partner, your children, etc. And really pause and ask yourself, okay, what is really going on here? What are my outcomes that I desire? And what am I willing to sacrifice or give up to get that result? It's like some people say, we'll talk about it later, but that's a way of avoiding the situation and not dealing with it. No, you have to set a time that you both agree and a safe place where you both have privacy and can be your true self. So being at the mall is not a time and place to have a discussion, or being at your in-laws' house. It's when you two are alone, right? Or if it's your boss, when you're in like a conference room together, not when you're in front of your coworkers, right? And then really be sure about your goals. So going in intentionally and knowing that what things are you willing to compromise? What isn't really that important at the end of the day? right? Because you got to look at the greater good. And I really hope that answered the question, because I didn't get everything Dr. Molly had spoken, but I definitely got the tail end when I switched devices.
Yes, yes, you did that. And Dr. Molly, to go back to your story, it takes courage to really recognize and be aware, I am in this pattern with my husband and son. And how can we break the pattern? And recognizing that also takes courage. And on top of that, saying, how can we do things differently rather than suggesting a solution? And that opens up the space for both all parties to listen and be receptive and find a solution that might be, mystical in nature. And Dr. Tomi, your strategy is, practical in that it's experience through life. And if we were to contemplate on the long-term relationship, whether with a child, with your partner, with your patients, and as we spoke about setting a healthy boundary as a practical tool, and also setting an example to break the pattern. And if you were to bring the insight about being a woman in the world, and where world expects us to do things just because, how do we, sort of day in, day out, give people that you're interacting with and give them a clear message that, hey, look, we're swimming under the water that has been infiltrated with the expectation that we need to do this as a woman, right? How do we swim out of that and say, flip the paradigm and get people understand, hey, the model that we're all swimming in is wrong, it's imbalanced. How can we say that to the world, kindly and sternly? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a multi-million-dollar question. I've asked myself that many times. It's a man's world, and then you add being a woman and having, our responsibilities. Now, I'm speaking from personal experience. Last year, I had near-death experiences with me and my daughter. Like, we both almost died, and it was traumatic to say the least. But I still had the role of owning a business and everything that came with it. But I was still required to be the physician, even though I still needed to be a patient. Responsibility of all grown adults here. This is your way to carry, and this is mine. I'm here to help you, but I'm not here to do it for you.
It's one thing to set a boundary and communicate that. And second thing is to model that. Right? And also keeping that word to yourself when you are talking with people. You can say, hey, respect my boundary. I cannot talk to you after 9 a.m. But when your child or your patient come to you after 9 and you attend to that person, then you're breaking your own boundary, right? That's a very important point here. Dr. Molly, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that there are several ways over the years that I've both learned this and taught others this. As a woman who has been my own, I've owned this practice, I've run this practice, and for a while I was a solo practitioner. My families in the practice needed to understand that boundaries existed for me in work life. And once they understood those boundaries, they were very respectful of them. And as you pointed out, Kate, beautifully, I would put on, for email was the main way I communicate with people, and I would put an auto reply on, and I was very careful not to reply, even if I was very tempted to. I would wait, and the auto reply said, if this is truly emergent, call me, here's my cell phone number. And I had to trust that they would do what an appropriate parent or adult would do and call me if they really needed to after those hours. And I learned over time to trust them. And that was hard because I was the one who was going to be taking care of all of them, right? Just me, super doctor, right? And I had to learn
Yes.
to trust that they could be trusted, that I didn't need to be superhero girl. And it was very good to set those boundaries. But by the same token, as I've grown my business, as my practice has grown, as I've brought in other people to work for me, and I've created that culture for them. I have male pediatricians working for me. I have female providers working for me. I want everyone to set boundaries. So in no way do I view this as a female issue. I view this as a human issue, right? So I want the men in my practice to have boundaries. I want the women in the practice to have boundaries. I'm tired of this being a discussion about gender, because I feel like that's limiting men too. And I feel like the more we can make it a cultural issue about family life is important, period, regardless of whether you're a woman or a man, that this is a priority in our office. And so whether you're a staff person, whether you're a physician provider, that family life has value. That's how we approach it from a cultural standpoint in our organization. And so we have paternity leave for, we have male staff members, we have male physicians, we have paternity leave. We kind of really are sort of finger shaky about it and want people to take it. But I know the point is really, how do you set those boundaries? And I feel like it's, as an individual, it's challenging enough. But if you're within an organization where the whole culture of the organization is discouraging boundaries between home life and work life, it's much harder to create that boundary around work and home. So I feel as though one of the things that can really affect both your work life, but also your home life, is choosing to work in an organization that supports your vision of what you want your life to be like, which goes to the idea of exactly what Dr. Tomi was talking about, choices. So if you're in a culture, in a work environment, which is not supporting, if you're feeling super stressed out and the time you have at home is very hectic, and you're cranky all the time at home, and you're constantly sort of reviewing things for work when you're at home, and you're not enjoying it, that's not bringing you joy, then rethinking where you work should be a high priority, rather than trying to work some sort of elaborate plan around how to restructure your home life.
You know, that sort of opens up a whole can of worms in the corporate culture and the world itself. It has come to a time to hear from our audience. And as we move into dialoguing with the audience, I'm careful not to touch the can of worms because this is a big topic here.
I think you can't help but touch it though, because they are so married to one another. We don't exist in a silo of home or a silo of work. They're,
Yeah. I have hope that over the years, in the upcoming years, that we would become more equipped with skills and be adaptive, as you all mentioned, and be more skilled as we move post-COVID era. So yeah, the dialogue is open for the audience. Anna, what is your reflection, and do you have any burning questions? And just feel free to share.
I was listening to all this what the doctors just said, and I agree. And I think I especially agree with Dr. Molly said about, it's about boundaries, period. And being working for American companies for most of my life, but also coming from different culture from Europe, I see that the culture and the capitalism, unfortunately, encourages the lack of boundaries. And this is all about controlling other people, right? So we are talking, in my opinion, we're talking about subjects as old as humankind, about power and control. But I'm very happy to see that this has been more frequently recognized, and pandemic or not, well, sorry to say it, but in some way, thanks for pandemic, we are better able because to put these boundaries, but it's not because we are so educated about it, but because we are so burned out that we know that we cannot, we cannot put our foot in front of another day if we do not do something differently. And I can empathize with what Dr. Tommy said about the like almost near-death experience. I did not have a near-death experience, but I quite frankly had very serious health issues. And I knew that maybe with all the lack of time, I had that time to see that if I don't do something, it will be really, really bad. And I think it's a very important topic. And as with everything, I would say new but not new idea, we have to talk about it more and more, because without making it a public case, like, populist case, it will always be a topic for a party, like how people are burned out, how they are worked, as horses, but nothing will change. I think we really need some serious actions that are supported by law, also by law. And I can see the difference in how the law enforces it, like, for example, in Europe or in the US. When I saw that going for maternity leave is like 2-3 weeks is 3 weeks is a privilege, it's a benefit, it really just knocks me out.
Yeah.
It is something, beyond my comprehensive, right? How people cannot be burned out if, for example, mother are not really protected and they have to go to work after 2 weeks, or I don't know, a week or something, when they give birth to children, right? This just starting with basics, right? And then it continues, I think, through our lives, mother, fathers. And I see my colleagues, well, not right now, but in my previous workplace, right? I saw my colleagues that were so proud of being burned out because they put so many hours. And I say, you know what? I don't care about being a VP. I want to have my life. I want to have time to knit laces. I want to have time to study Stanford. I want to have life to meet my friends, even if it means that I earn a little bit less money. But this should not be the case, because for economy, this is much better when people really are rested, are not burnt out, because they are more productive. Unfortunately, the religion of hours put into to work is still alive. And that's how I see that. Pretty good as for anesthesia, right?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, those drugs are working for you. Well done. That's right.
Thank you.
I think too, the pandemic created this burnout. Burnout's been around forever, right? The pandemic didn't create burnout. And I think I also think that certainly physicians had a new experience with war-like stress, right? It was the volume and the severity of illness and the experience of death and dying in constancy was unlike anything but wartime medical experiences for physicians. So short of, and therefore, and I don't mean just the physicians, the nurses, the staff supporting the hospital systems, you know, all of that, and then the mourning and grief of the families who were going through that with the separation. It really was like wartime in so many ways, and so the fact that it, you know, it's being experienced in that way because of all of the common aspects of it, the separation, the inability to grieve in a typical way, the stressors on the frontline workers, you know, all of these things. And it's as if war was happening on everybody's home soil, all at about the same time, created a global stress unlike anything else. Wars in previous times would definitely be devastating, but they weren't happening kind of simultaneously everywhere. They were, you know, in a certain theater of the world, and, you know, so people in other areas of the world could just be sort of, you know, affected, but in a very sort of tangential way. So I think that this global experience and the stress of it, the anxiety it creates still, and the aftermath of rebirth, recovery, renewal that will come from it is you know, I hate the word unprecedented, but it is legit. And people are rethinking every aspect of their lives. We all, whether we were directly touched by it, or whether we've you know, kind of lived it only in the sense that we were locked in for a long time, we're forced to face ourselves in a different way, forced to face our relationships in a different way. And came out of it, I would say most people came out of it with a way of thinking about ourselves in the world, less inclined to do things the same way all over again.
I want to add.
Well, and how that
Yes.
looks for each person may be a little different. Some people may come out and say, I'm not doing that job anymore. Some people may come out and say, I'm not living my free time the same way anymore. But I think everybody is, you know, reassessing things.
I want to add something, I would say iconoclastic here. And I think that the situation that we had with pandemic is nothing new. I think it is new here in America and in the countries and the well-developed countries where the last war was many years ago. And I think this is why we think that if it's something new to us, it must be new to everyone. And I'm not disagreeing. I think this is I admit and acknowledge this kind of perception, right? But I lived through times where we had war in Europe, and people just didn't see it because they did not experience it, right? But I was impacted. I know also that the survival is something we have in our DNA. Unfortunately, I think with the hedonistic lifestyle, we have just put kind of a veil on that skill. Like we don't. Well, it is not very. How to say? It's not a comfortable situation, right? When you have to survive. So we try to put it away, like with many things, because we feel like we have control when having money, education, or civilization. We feel that's my perception only, that we can, if we don't think about it, it doesn't happen. But things happen, and this pandemic, for me, did I like it? No, I lost my parents, my mom. Many things changed in my life because of that. So I was impacted. Nevertheless, I felt that my survival skill kicked in. And yes, we never have the certainty, you know, if we make it, if it doesn't impact our families. It's like with strategy, right? You can only evaluate it afterwards, right? So now we can see and do the aftermath of the losses, the gains. But I still think that just like every war kicks the economy and thinking, this pandemic a very special type of war had to kick our beliefs in what we can do on our own, beliefs in, how we can use our bodies to the maximum without pouring in, right? We are just looking at this output thing. And when I think about doctors, when you said doctors, nurses, I think this pandemic really showed what happened there anyway. These people are burnt out even without it. Show me, you are doctors. I come from the family of doctors, right? But I am not a doctor. But how many hours do the resident young doctor has to put just to make through the first years, just as a resident, right? Yeah. And it's insane. It is insane. And then, all the rest is built upon that, right? So pandemic showed it to everyone. Of course, it was a very bad situation. There were, a lot of people, much more people, right? But it, in my opinion, it showed the problem that already exists and made us think. And I do believe that if we do not take it further, if we forget about it, if we don't take this lesson, it will be a big waste of pandemic.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think that, I think I said at the beginning that it really just amplified things that were already there. And I do completely agree with you. I think what creates a bigger opportunity is that we all experienced it together. Yes. And unlike a tornado that hits one place, this is something we all experienced together, and that is unusual in its universality, and so right. Theoretically, at least, it is a commonality that could bring us together, in this shared experience, and allow us to, when we need help, right? And that, although I've discovered something about myself, I don't know exactly how to move forward. We at least have a world, literally, of people who might be able to relate to that and potentially give a holler of support.
I agree with you.
I really appreciate Anna sharing, and about this whole situation, the pandemic. Resiliency is key. Most of the world, billions of people live under constant stress, trauma, and scarcity. They're not worried about toilet paper. They have bigger things to worry about. But here in North America, we're worrying about toilet paper. And I laugh because I was born in a third world country. So for me, yes, the pandemic was hard. Yes, I almost died. My kid almost died. I had family that died. I had funerals, et cetera, et cetera. Don't get me wrong. But I also had life where I had nothing. But I live in a country where there's still access to social services and food, and I don't need food banks, but I'm saying we're not living in the majority of the world where they're literally going to starve. We got to learn resiliency. It starts with the children.
And everybody else may experience the stress and overwhelm of their job, but they don't have the luxury of oh, I have burnout, and so what can I do?
Worked in the countries, and it is we should expect from ourselves to use that discomfort of ours to do something for a bigger group of people.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
Well, and even though the trickle down theory doesn't necessarily work in economics very well, I do think the idea of kind of mental wellness, of creating a sense, a cultural sense of others orientation and self-care, that combination is contagious in a good way. So if an organization creates that culture, and if a family creates that culture, that will spread. And so even though people who are indeed in a social status or an economic status where the luxury of taking time off from their job in order to deal with the mental stress of their work, or whatever isn't an option for them, hopefully over time the work environments will shift in ways that can support the mental stresses of work and home life differently, to support them as well.
I do believe that this is our responsibility to drive this in the organizations, because the organizations are people. We cannot wait and just wait that someone else do this. You know, this story about, you know, something and someone, there is a story if and nothing and anyone. So like really everyone were looking and waiting for someone else to do something and nobody did, right? So if you Google it, it's a really funny but very educational story, a short story. And I think that it all here, every kind of summit like this makes sense, not only because of talking, but also because it drives, or it should drive, some actions.
Because I can set a boundary and say,
Yes.
I'm not doing all the work, right?
Of course.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, there's a lot of pieces and chunks here that is, you know, metaphorically delicious. And what do we do with what we, you know, dialogue today? Talking about it is one thing, and putting the structure and action into is a second thing. And I'm grateful for your insight. And as we intended to speak about balancing burnout and relationship strategy, we went zoom out and talked about the ecosystem of the corporate world. And thanks for bringing that into our dialogue. And we're a colleague at Stanford, we care about this as we are in the corporate world. And how do we use our privilege to benefit humanity? That's a great insight too. So ladies, if you are okay, I'd like to close our summit with 1 minute meditation to bring all of our energy in so we can carry on with balance. So allow me to guide us and please close your eyes. And taking a deep breath in. And out. And taking a breath in, as you take in, imagine your lungs filling with clean air, golden energy, and breathe out any imbalances. And I ask you to have your spine straight. You're laying down, relax all your muscles. And taking a deep breath in. We feel dignified as we breathe out. We recognize life is all good and there's work to do. Taking a last breath in, filling your lungs with gratitude for our health, to have this dialogue. Then push out all that no longer serves us. The exhale. And please open your eyes with a balance. I would like to thank everyone here, Dr. Molly, Dr. Tomi, and Anna, for sharing your insight. Now, thank you everyone for tuning in. We have a program designed for you to build inner happiness easily in 30 days. In the 30-day happiness premium program, we host world-renowned Dr. Fred Luskin from Stanford University, research scientist Dr. Narjas from Tohoku University, and Edward Anthony from Stanford Children's Health. They elaborate further about the healthy benefits of forgiveness and scientific benefit of meditation. The program is available now at lifeofemerald.com/all-classes. Sign up today. And Dr. Tomi and Dr. Molly, how do we get in touch with you? Could you share?
Yeah, for sure. So Instagram at mental wellness coach _ or LinkedIn, which has been my favorite, and Clubhouse. It's at Dr. Tomi Mitchell. Just search me, you'll find me. So there you go.
Thank you, Dr. Tomi and Dr. Molly.
And for me, you can visit my website, which is drmollyoshea.com. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Molly O'Shea, but the doctor is spelled out, DOCTOR. Or you can find me on LinkedIn as well, Dr. Molly O'Shea, and of course on Clubhouse, it's the same name. So I was consistent, at least with my name.
Last word of advice for our audience listening in the corporate world.
Yes, I do. So people often ask, when should they seek help? It's when you start thinking of that question. That's when it's time to get help. Don't wait till you're burnt out, frustrated, your marriage breaks down, your relationships break down with your kids, your family. Your health takes a hit. Deal with it now.
Definitely, definitely. Dr. Molly.
I would suggest that the most important relationship that you have in your life is with yourself. Knowing yourself well, loving yourself, and feeling at peace with yourself, being comfortable in your own skin, will allow you to be authentic with everybody else. It makes it easier to set boundaries at work and at home. So if you're feeling at times like you're not saying things that sound like you, or you have to pretend about how you're feeling with other people, then maybe it is a good idea to figure out who you really are. What do you really stand for? And who do you want to be in all these relationships? Because the more you can just be yourself all the time, the easier it'll be in every other relationship in the workplace and at home.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies, I'll see you. I hope to see you around. Bye now.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.